right. Still getting people pouring in here. All right. There's a lot of interest, so I appreciate everyone showing up today. It seems like a topic that a lot of people are interested in. It's something that I have some background in, so was excited to kind of share some of my expertise with all of you guys today. Um, as a kind of introduction, my name is Maxwell Breeden. I'm a UX research lead for a grocery retailer out in the United States. I know we've got people here from all over, so that's really exciting. My background worked with a lot of different companies, from Delta Airlines to Kohler Company, which works in bathroom and kitchen products, to Truist Bank. So worked in all sorts of different industries, and I've used a research repository basically everywhere that I've gone. And the one that I'm going to be walking you guys through today is one that was taught to me, years ago, that I found a lot of value in, and have kind of slowly made adaptations to it over the years, to kind of meet the needs of the team that I'm on. And so excited to kind of walk through this. Um, I am based out of Florida, in the United States. I saw it. We've got people all over the world coming for this webinar, which is really cool to see. Uh, yeah, so I guess it's a little bit about me. My expertise kind of falls. So I am a lead, but I work primarily in kind of some of the research ops and UX ops space. So I've done everything from repositories to insight tracking, which I'll actually have a future webinar on in February if you guys are interested. I've done everything from journey mapping to service blueprinting, setting roadmaps, and all sorts of different things. So um, assuming this one goes well, maybe you'll be invited to some other ones I'll set up to kind of touch on a bunch of various projects you guys may be interested in. Well, without further ado, let's get started. So I wanted to ask a poll question. Let's see if I can set this up correctly. Just to see how many of you are using a repository at the moment. So I think I can set this up right now. Here we go. Hopefully that's appearing for you guys. All right, so quite a few no's. So no repository at all. That's good to know. All right, we got one person that maybe has one currently, but and I'd be interested too if you do have a repository. Maybe are there any pain points or issues that you have with your current system, that you would maybe like to try and improve upon, or why you're maybe looking to a new way of doing things? I'd be really interested. All right, well, we'll end it there. Keep the chat going if you guys have any questions or comments as we go through. But good to know kind of the lay of the land. So a lot of you guys aren't currently using a repository, so it's good to know. Well, today I'm going to be going over an overview of the UX research repository that I kind of use, kind of a bare bones version. And it is based in Airtable. And I'm going to send you guys a link to sign up. It's completely free. I'm not associated with Airtable, so I don't really get anything. I think I get some account credit maybe, but okay. Yeah, Razi. Okay, bare bones needs a lot more added. Yeah, and I'll get to kind of why I use Airtable. So let me actually change this screen that I'm sharing here. And let me just share. I'm going to share my entire screen. It's always easier for me. So if I can't see your questions in the chat. I think you guys can come off mute. Hopefully you can. So yeah, feel free to come off chat or come off mute and speak up if needed. So why I recommend Airtable, as you guys sign up and create your free account, why I recommend it is it's free, and the only limitation of why you might need to upgrade is storage capacity. I believe the limitation is about 1,200 records or 2 gigabytes, which you should not be running into, at least for the purposes of a repository. It's basically, if you think about it, like 1,200 studies. If you're planning on running 1,200 studies anytime soon, then maybe you could look at upgrading. But I recommend it because it usually gives you enough time to play around in it, get used to it, use it for a while, see if it's the right fit. And if it is, it gives you time to talk to your stakeholders, make sure you can get funding and all that stuff. So, and there's certainly ways around it. I've never needed the upgraded version of Airtable to kind of manage our repositories in the past. We've gotten the upgraded version once, and it was useful and handy, but not necessary to at least get started and use a lot of the functionality that will be useful for you guys. So as you create an Airtable account, this is what it will look like. This is your dashboard, and you've got different workspaces in here. You'll see this top one here is just called UX Research, and I've got a UX repository already in here that I'll walk you guys through. And each of these tiles is called a base, and so you can create multiple different kinds. You can have them all integrated together. You can make it as simple or complex as you need to. But let's dive in here. All right. And then, like I said, I'm going to just give an overview of kind of the finished product so you guys can see what it will look like and how you might be able to use it when it's all said and done. I've populated just some kind of fake data in here for an e-commerce platform, just so you guys can kind of see what it would look like with some projects in here. What I like to describe Airtable as is basically a glorified Excel document that has like way more useful functionality. So this is like the table view. So kind of where I typically will input a lot of the information. You'll see they've got different tables here. We've got one for projects, which is basically the main repository. And then we've got one for keywords, one for tools, one for teams, and a couple other ones in here. I also use Airtable for note-taking during studies. And I'll walk through that in probably a future webinar just due to the sake of time, as well as the insight tracker, which basically goes into the findings and recommendations from every study and what the teams are doing with those insights after your readout. So really interesting stuff. It's all tied together, which makes things really simple. For the repository itself, I typically, and you can add whatever variables that you want to track. I always recommend keeping it as simple as possible. I've had teams where they've wanted to track over 100 different metrics and variables for their repository, and everyone hated it. The more things you got to keep track of, the less people want to do it, the more time it takes out of them being able to do their research. And it just becomes way too tedious. So I recommend, as you guys set up your own, keep it down to just the things that you feel like you need to keep track of. And I apologize, let me add some more people in here. All right, and then, so I'll kind of walk through the different variables I recommend. Keeping track of, obviously, the project name is going to be important. Description of what the study is about, the lead researcher that worked on the project. If they're a part of your Airtable team, you can assign it to them so they can get notified if any projects get assigned to them. The key stakeholders, this is helpful for kind of for posterity's sake. If you're looking back at projects in the future, it's good to know who kind of were the point of contacts for the request and so forth. The status of the project, is it in the backlog? Is it in progress? Is it complete? Again, you can get as granular as you want. If you want to break it down by, hey, we're in the planning stages for this project, or we're in the building out the report stage of this project, you can get as detailed as you want. So um, we'll kind of walk through that in a sec. And then probably the most important thing with this repository, and again, I apologize, I wish I could automate that, but I didn't look into that earlier, is the keywords. And so this helps you to easily find and search for whatever projects that may be relevant to a particular topic. And so let's say someone came to you and was looking for, hey, do we have any research on order summaries? What you can do is either do the traditional Control F, search order summaries in here and find, hey, we've got 3 records that, touch on order summary. Or you can, basically what it's doing is it's tied to this new table that populates all the different keywords. So this is alphabetized. You can search for order summary. And then right here, you can see, cool, we've got 3 projects. We've got checkout, contact us, and cart that all touches on order summary. And you can click onto each of these and get all the full details of that study, which is really helpful. And then you also can tie the insights from those studies to that keyword as well. And it all kind of rolls up together, which is really helpful, as long as you're tracking the right keywords, right? Sometimes it's you are doing it in retrospect and you're like, oh, I should have tagged it differently. But it is nice. I mean, you can add as many or as few keywords as you think are relevant. But that's probably one of the most useful parts of the repository, is making it very simple and easy to find previous research studies and studies that have similarities and overlap, right? So those 3 studies that all had touched on order summary. Another important aspect of the repository is tracking, when was the work done? I currently work in more of a safe agile environment, so I like to just group it into kind of time buckets like a PI, just because, as some of you guys are probably familiar, start and end dates can be a little gray. Sometimes things get delayed or most of the work was done, and then maybe there's a second part or a second phase of the project that gets done way later. So I tend to avoid start and end dates specifically, but you can do that if that best fits your team needs. And then I also track things like the method and the tools. And what's really cool, which again, I probably won't be able to cover today, but maybe in a future webinar, is tracking basically the performance. So what you can do is roll up all of this information into a dashboard later and see, cool, over this past year, how many moderated studies did we do? How many unmoderated studies did we do? How many interviews did we do? And even for the tools, right? Like, hey, how much did we use UserZoom this past year? Oh, cool, we ran, 20 different studies with UserZoom. Maybe we should, that can kind of help you with budgeting, kind of help you prioritize, make sure, one, like, are you spending money on tools that you're not using? And 2, if you are using tools, how much are you using of them? And what kind of studies are you using with them? Also track number of participants, which can be helpful with budgeting as well. Again, the insights that are maybe tied to each study. And then another really critical aspect is the link to the report. And this is where, again, it goes back to the storage thing, but as long as you're just linking maybe directly to like a SharePoint file or a Google Drive file, you won't run into any storage issues. Rather than just like if you uploaded the file to Airtable, then you might run into some storage issues there. But so I always just recommend giving it a direct link to more of that secure database where you may house your files. So that's kind of just an overview of what I recommend typically tracking in a repository. What's really also helpful with a repository like this in Airtable is you can customize the views to your needs. So a lot of people get overwhelmed when they see kind of this Excel format with a lot of different data in here. So what they do is they'll create, like, let's say I just want to see my projects, right? What are all the projects that are just related to me? You can click into views here, create a different grid or calendar view, Kanban view, whatever is your preference. and you can search or you can filter, group, sort by whatever you need. So for me, if I'm just want to see my work, let's say I just filter down by researcher and I just toggle myself, I can see, and then I grouped it by status. So I can see all of my work that I have that's in the backlog, that's in progress, and that's complete. Sorry, I just heard one more person join. There we go. Cool. So there's a lot of different ways you can kind of cut and segment out the information to best fit your needs. Also, people like the Kanban view. I use this for kind of team stand-ups. So let's say, hey, Susan or Sandy, like what projects are you working on? I'll filter by their name, select them. I can see all the work that they're doing, what's in progress, what's complete. I can click into it, get more details on the study, track maybe the progress. If there's specific things that I want to, maybe they're not there that day and I have questions on, hey, where are you at with this project? I can leave them a comment. So I can come over here and be like, hey, what's the status? Like I already said earlier, and have them reply directly to me. So it's really great for collaboration with your team, keeps things organized. You can also, with the premium view, if you do end up upgrading eventually, you can get like the timeline and the Gantt view. I don't have that currently, but I can maybe create another video for you guys that kind of walks through if you want to create like a roadmap of all of the work that's going to be done over the next 2 years. You can create those different views too. So that's a lot of information. Any questions from you guys? Again, I can't see the chat, unfortunately, but hopefully you guys can come off mute. Hopefully it will let you.
Yeah, what was that limitation on size again?
Oh, yes. So if you missed it, so for Airtable, you shouldn't run into any size restrictions for the most part with your repository. They limit the number of records. So basically each record, so like, let's say search, this would count as a record, each row. You get 1,200 records for each base. And then it's like 2 gigabytes per base as well. So basically like this whole thing, as long as you don't have over basically 1,200 different studies and you're not uploading the full actual PDF reports to it, you shouldn't run into any storage limitations.
Thank you.
Yep. Good question though. Any others?
Yeah, Erith asked, and I wanted to know as well. Let's see, her question says, is there any way to display frequencies of keywords, not just the number of projects they occur in? And my add-on to her question is, are there any trending capabilities or word cloud capabilities, anything like that in there?
For the word cloud, no, there isn't, but I did mention dashboards. And so it's actually called interfaces. Probably won't have time to go through that, but there is a capability where you can basically have it populate how many, studies did we run with this particular keyword. You could have it, again, roll up how many studies did we use with each tool, and so forth. Unfortunately, I don't have it built out in here, so I can't show you guys what that looks like yet. For keywords, it basically is doing that here. So it is saying like how many projects had been tied to order summary. That's basically how many times the keyword was used, right? Because you put one keyword per project. So it's basically, I think, answering that question. Does that help?
Thank you.
Yep. Yeah, and as we for the kind of second part of this workshop, I'll walk through like step by step. Hopefully, we'll have enough time of like how to actually do that. They've got different fields here, so you'll see this one's called like a count, and you can basically just have it count how many projects are tied to this keyword. So and I can also show you real quick too. We've got a table for tools. So basically, UserZoom is a popular one. SurveyMonkey is popular. You can have it populate and keep track of all this data as well. So if you want to keep track of, hey, we've got a UserZoom tool, here's a quick description of it. Here's like a list of all the studies that have used UserZoom. You can get a roll up of the count here, a link to the source, and maybe a point of contact too. I've noticed on my team, as people get onboarded or offboarded and they need to get access to different tools, it's sometimes nice to be able to keep track of who they need to reach out to. So I try to do that as well. And then ultimately this all rolls up. So if you've got point of contacts, it all rolls up into, you could basically create an entire org structure in here as well. So if you're tracking your stakeholders, you can see, all the names of the people you've worked with, their email and contact info, that you can track, their department, role, the studies that they've requested or, worked with you on, and maybe the tools that they own or something like that. So a lot of different ways in which you can kind of tie things together and keep track of different types of information.
So Erith had a follow-on question. What about keywords on insights? Is this where data is tagged? And she can't unmute, which is why I'm asking her questions.
Oh, okay. No, yeah, perfect. Thank you. So for insights, again, I was going to create a different webinar for that, but I can show you the table real quick. So we've got, basically what I would do is it keeps track of the insight and recommendation, basically like the key findings and summary that you would put in the end of your report. We go through and track the severity of that, maybe the resolution status. Is it something we're pursuing right now? Is it resolved? Or is it something that we can't pursue due to dev limitations, right? And then you can keep track of keywords tied to this as well, if you want. I actually do it for my note-taking sometimes. Let's see here if I have it. I don't. But let's say like you're interested in, you're taking notes and you're like, hey, this has to do with the cart during this study or the fulfillment selector. You can keep track of all those different kind of topics or keywords related to each insight as well. Yeah. And it's certainly a lot to kind of digest all in this meeting. So that's kind of why I'm going to break it up. But I do want to be able to share that, yes, it is a capability.
Can I ask about the integration between UserZoom and Airtable? Like, I'm curious about the note-taking in Airtable versus UserZoom, and like why you do that, and then if it's integrated or.
It's not integrated. What I do is, so mostly for moderated studies, you can take notes, right, in UserZoom. I like to keep everything in Airtable. It's just a personal preference. But for moderated studies, I take my notes in Airtable because it's simple to kind of consolidate things. And again, I don't want to like spend too much time going through how I do it, but I'll maybe create another follow-up video on that. But what I'll do, I'll quickly show you. Let's say you're in a session and your participant does something and you want to take note of it. Participant thinks X, Y, Z. You can say what part of the study is it on. Let's say it's part of like the cart screen, right? During the usability task. You can track that it's an insight and you can track which participant it was. What I do then is afterward, let's see if I'm even, okay, I was already in the insights. So what I do is I have a view for all the raw notes. So I'll go through, take a bunch of notes, keep track of the participant. And then what I do is they're all labeled as insights. Afterward, I go through and say, hey, there was 3 people that talked about the participant not knowing the cost of the delivery. Let's, consolidate that. So what I would do is basically maybe copy their data in there, move it over here, and add that participant to this group. And then what I would do is uncheck it. So then what we're seeing here is, oh, all of these people said the same thing. And then it makes your kind of analysis a little bit faster. Because then what I would do is just say, cool, this was the finding. Let me drop that into the report. I can say 4 out of 10 people said this, etc. So is that helpful?
Yeah, thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
Hi, so is there a place where you keep all your quotes, and do you share them with your stakeholders?
I mean, yeah, just within the note taking. Like if someone has a quote and you want to record it, you can write down their quote. Typically, I'll look back at the transcript from, for example, user Zoom, and just pull the quote. And typically, like I don't always put it in my notes section as I'm going through, but I may put it in the report just to kind of provide additional context to an insight that I'm sharing.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah.
So, hey, I got a quick question. So, part of the utility of our repository is, it collects a bunch of stuff, and for me, it's about sharing that stuff out with other folks, so stakeholders, for example. So, I'm wondering, is there this would make sense for researchers, right? But a lot of our stakeholders are not researchers, and so I'm kind of wondering what a deliverable would be, or what a stakeholder sort of view of this repository would look like. Because it makes sense to me as a researcher, but as a non-researcher,
Yes, yeah.
What does it look like? Yeah.
Yeah. So obviously, like you're probably creating a report too with all of your insights, and that's usually what you would do in a share out. However, if you want your stakeholders to be able to access old studies and be able to search for things, kind of like a self-service tool, it is great for that as well. What I've noticed is some people don't want to have to create a whole nother account for another tool. And if you don't want them to have to go through that process and like get into the full repository, what I've done as well is just created a view only access. So they have this button here that says share view, and you can share this directly with them. What I'll do typically is, let's say it's a stakeholder that only works in a certain area or on certain products, right? You can filter it by, that particular set of products. I don't know if I have anything in here currently, like maybe a value stream if you work in that kind of capacity, but basically you would filter by that and then share that view with them directly, and then they would have a view of, let's say, all the projects that are ongoing for whatever is relevant to them. What I also have done in the past that's helpful is to keep them informed of studies that are ongoing, is you can create automations, and I've got one set up here for a UX research newsletter that basically will go through, it will search for any records or any projects that have been completed over the past month. And then I have it automatically send an email of those records, and I have it customized to only basically show, let me see if I can show it here, the project, the objective, the researcher who worked on it, and the readout link, or the link to the report. So all of that will be in the email. And then I also just add a couple extra links. So hey, if you want to request a study, visit this link. If you want to see the full repository and search for any research that we've done in the past, use this link. Let me see if I can generate a preview of that real quick. It's not very great on the preview, but this is basically what it would look like. And you can customize it and make it look a little bit prettier. But just as showing you a capability of what you can do. And then I think I forgot to also touch on it, but if you do use an intake form, you can do that as well. And I can show you in a sec, but does that kind of help answer that question?
Yeah, I was generally, I unfortunately have to step out for the next minute, but I wanted to get a sense for whether this is a tool really just for researchers to sort of track their own stuff. Like, to me, that's how it's coming across. It's like it's keeping track of all the various notes, insights, and stuff I've done over the course of a project or various projects, but not so much a tool for an organization to sort of access. Like it's really, and so that's where I'm wondering if that's where my disconnect is. Maybe I'm just simply not understanding it. But my goal for a repository is that basically anybody can go in there, look, use keywords to search for insights that were collected from previous studies. Like anybody can
Oh,
do it,
yeah.
and the view should be fairly straightforward.
Yeah, hopefully, maybe you missed it in the beginning, but we do have keywords in here, tracked with every project. So let's say you flag everything like order summary, you have got a stakeholder that's interested in studies related to order summary. What they would do is they can either just control F for it or go to keywords. It's alphabetized here. So let's say they're interested in order summary. They can see all the projects here that are related to that. And they can click on it, get all the details of the study, and click on the link to view the full report if they're interested.
And given your experience, do you feel like this is this because I'm thinking of maybe small, medium-sized businesses up to enterprise and really large businesses. Is this, given your experience, does this scale to really large organizations, or is it better suited for smaller words?
I've only worked with multi-billion-dollar companies, so I
Sure.
would say yes.
Okay.
But I mean, every team's slightly different. Everyone works slightly differently. I got a lot of stakeholders that they don't want to have to look through a tool like this. They just ping me and are like, "Hey, do you have any studies on, this or that?" And what's nice is, it's easier for me as well to find related studies. So this is how I also use it. And it might save them, a couple minutes to learn, how to search for things, but it also only takes me a couple seconds to pull data as well.
Okay. Awesome. I do have to drop, but I want to thank you for your time so far. Is this going to be available to see? Like, if I missed the remaining half hour, am I going to
Yeah.
see a video of it?
Yeah, I'll
Okay.
record it. Yeah.
All right, cool. Well,
So,
thank you.
yep. Yeah, thanks for joining. All right. Any other questions before we dive into kind of how to actually put this all together? All right. Well, let's get started. If you guys have had the chance to sign up for Airtable, feel free to follow along. Otherwise, feel free to reference the video later to kind of go through it. I'll also try and just share what we worked through today with you guys as a template to get started. But what we'll do is go through, create a new base, and we will give it a name. So let's say it's the UX Research repository here. You can give it a color, you can give it an icon, whatever you're most interested in here. We'll make it blue. All right. And then let's say, going back to understanding what are the things that you feel like your team needs to keep track of. Those are the things that you'll want to kind of create different columns for. And then, so typically, right, the first one is going to be the project name. So we'll keep this just as a single line of text and click save. Another really important thing to keep track of that we talked about was maybe a description of the study or your research objectives. We'll just call it description for now. And we'll give that a long text in case there's multiple lines of information you want to keep track of. And let's say it looks a little condensed right now. What you can do too is adjust the height here. So I like to kind of work in a space where it's like medium or tall just to give it a little bit more room. So we'll do that real quick. And then we've got here, let's say we want to keep track of who the lead researcher is, like who's assigned to this project, right? And you can either create that as a user. So if your team all has access to this base, you can have it as a user and assign it directly to them and have them get notified of it. Or you can have it as like a multi-select or a single select and just add their name. But we'll go with the user for now. That usually makes the most sense. And then status. Status is going to be important to keep track of where the project is at. So we'll have this as a single select, and you can give it a different color if you want. Let's say we want one to track if it's in the backlog, and let's give that just kind of a gray color. If it's in progress, we'll give it a yellow color, and if it's complete, we'll make it green. Sometimes we get studies that get put on hold, so let's put something in here on hold. And again, you might have different statuses or ways in which you want to track your projects. Totally fine. You can kind of edit the options here to best meet those needs. And if you guys want, like, need me to slow down or stop at any point, feel free to speak up. So I'm just going to kind of keep moving along here. Let's say you also want to know who are the stakeholders, like who else like maybe requested this, or who have you been, who needs to be looped in on important like meetings such as the kickoff meeting or the readout. This might be something we want to keep. Let's say we want to also keep track of these stakeholders in another table to keep track of what studies that they're working on. What we'll do in that situation is actually have it linked to another record. And what that will do is it will create a new table, and we'll call this one stakeholders. All right, so we create that link, and you'll see here it created a new table as well. So what we're going to be doing is, let's say I put in James T as a stakeholder. It will now populate into this table. And then, of course, you can add more details about that stakeholder in there. All right, and then let's say next one we want to keep track of is the keywords, right? To make it easier to search and find studies that are related to each other. So let's create one that's called keywords. And what we'll do there is also link that to another record so that it's easier to search and find those records. So we'll call this one keywords as well. And again, you'll see that table populate. And then we'll keep moving along here. Let's say we want to track like when the study started and when the study ended. So we'll add a new field for the date, and we'll call it start date. And then we'll make another one here, like the same thing, called end date. And again, you can kind of handle it however best meets your team's needs. Next, let's see what else we would want here. Let's say we want to keep track of the methods that were used on this study. And since sometimes, right, we work in mixed methods, let's do a multi-select so that, maybe there was some interviews and we want to track that with the usability that we followed up with later. You can either separate those into different projects or keep them all combined, but let's call this one methods. And let's add the options here. So maybe we do interviews, maybe moderated usability, unmoderated usability. And then let's say that's all we wanted to create at this point. And then later on, maybe we did a new method that we typically don't do. And so let's say it was like a heuristic evaluation. If you start typing into it, you'll see, oh, we didn't have that listed as an option earlier. Well, it's easy enough to just type it in and then click enter, and it will create that as a new option. So you don't have to create all the fields and options ahead of time. You can create them as you go. So if new methods or things come up later on, it's easy to add them. It is important, though, as your team starts to add in methods, that they don't misspell things. What's nice is it will show you as you start to type that there's already an option here. But I have had researchers on my team in the past that have misspelled things, and then all of a sudden there becomes a lot of different options that all look, the same. Let's say someone else spelled heuristic wrong, and now we've got two of them. There is one way in which you can, oh, it didn't save it. If you do try to delete it and there's a record that has that labeled, you can redirect what those get turned into. So not the end of the world. Okay, yeah, so it will convert it for you. There we go. All right, moving along, let's say we also want the tools in here. And for maybe some operational reasons you want to make sure you're keeping track of that, I will also create this as a link to a new record. Oops. And we'll create that field. And then let's say number of participants we want to keep track of. This one, you might just want to just keep track of numbers. And you can make it a decimal if you want, but we'll keep it whole number here. Cool. All right. And then let's say we also want one to keep track of all of our insights. Again, we'll create another table for that. And then let's say the final report, right? We want to make sure that we're keeping track of the final report that gets shared out. You can either create this as a link. Where did that go? A URL link, or you can also post the links as just in like a long text field as well. Sometimes you might have multiple links, so I'll do that. But there should only maybe be one share out or one report. We'll just do one URL here, and we'll call that the final report. All right, and then let's also say, maybe you want to keep track of the links to the prototypes that were used for your study. You can also do that. Again, let's say there's multiple that you usually get, maybe one for mobile, one for desktop. We'll just make it a long text then, and that way when you go in there, you can add both. Cool. So that does it. That creates basically your repository. And what you can do is just start inputting information. You can also, I believe there's a way to add, if you have it all in like an Excel document, you can also probably upload it. I'm trying to think of how to do that off the top of my head, but I think you can also just copy and paste. But this will hopefully help get you started. If you have an intake form, I forgot to mention that earlier, but let's say you have one and you want to have it automatically upload to this repository to keep things simple for project tracking. So what you'll do is you'll create this form view, and we'll call it intake form. I know some people like intake forms. I don't always like it, but let me see if I can move this out of the way. There we go. All right, so we got our intake form, and obviously we don't want people to have to fill out all of that information for us. So maybe there's only certain information we need from them, right? So maybe the project name will be important to collect, maybe a description from the stakeholder. They don't need to tell us who's going to work on it. So what we'll do is just drag that over here. They also don't need to see the status. We could leave stakeholders in there if they want, but let's say we don't need it here. We can assign the keywords ourselves. Let's say this, maybe we want to know, like, when is this research due, right? Well, then we probably would put that under end date. And you'll see here, it's still tied to our end date field, but we'll call it something else. So we'll say, when do you need this research? Or something along those lines. And so we'll name it something else, but when they submit it, that will populate into our end date field so that we know when it's due. And you can, again, customize it to whatever needs you have, but that's a trick you may have. They don't need to figure out the tools or methods that we are going to be using, or the number of participants, insights, or final report. But let's say maybe they're a designer, they've got prototype links. What we could do too is if we wanted to just say resources. So if they have like maybe a business pitch deck or something, they can add that as well. And you can add description text too. So please add any additional resources that may help provide additional context to your request. Cool. All right, and so let's say that's all you need from the stakeholders. You can customize this again. Please fill out this form, and a researcher will get back to you shortly. Cool. Well, how do we share this form? Well, what we can do here is click this link at the top. It will give you a link here, and I'll show you what that looks like. If you click on to, if you open it up, this is basically what it would look like. So you'd have your project, the name of the requester, the objectives, when you need the results by, resource links. This one's kind of more built out, just as an example. With the premium version, of course, you can like add your own logo and all that stuff. But for internal teams and requests, usually you don't need to be too fancy with it. And then you can share this link out basically among your channels. If people have any requests, they can fill that out. What's nice is, let's say actually, let's open this one up separately. Cool. And then let's just fill this out. I'm just going to say test, test, test. And you can have it email a copy. Cool. So that's what it looks like to submit it. But how does it look when it comes in? Well, if you go back to the grid view, you'll see, all right, it came in. We've got the information here. What's nice is you can have it notify you when someone makes a request. And what you can do is say, cool, I want Max to be on that project. It's still in the backlog. This would be like whoever requested it would have that populated. You can assign it keywords, start dates, all that stuff. But you would basically have all the information you need to kick off that project with the stakeholders. So let's say we also just want to rename this to projects. Perfect. All right. So that's basically how to set up the repository. Any questions? I know that was probably pretty fast as well, but any questions or comments on how to actually build it step by step? All right, cool. Well, let's say, I mean, we've got a few more minutes. I can kind of show you. So let's say we want to also build out the keywords part of this. Basically what we would do is just go in here, add the keyword, and let's say we want to keep track of the projects. So this is pulling, it's linked to the projects folder and pulling the name of the project that's tied to that keyword. We'll just rename it projects. And then let's say we want the roll up, right? Of, well, how many studies are, tied to that keyword? We can do, I believe it's count, and we will just have it count the number of projects that are related to that keyword. And we'll just call it number of projects. So now let's just fill out a couple of these. For example, let's say we've got a study on the cart. Max was the researcher. It's completed. James T was the stakeholder. Let's say there was a progress tracker on that study that we want to kind of keep track of. Start and end date doesn't really matter. And let's say, all right, cool. So it automatically populated the project name and the number of projects related to that keyword as we type that information in. So, and as you'll see here with stakeholders, James T popped up and it populated the name of the project. Again, we have to rename all these, the project. And then tools as well and all the other information. So cool. Again, any questions on how to kind of set it up? And again, I'll share this template out with you guys after the webinar, so you guys can kind of use it as well.
a more general question. How did you, as far as other folks using this, who was the kind of cheerleader for it? How did you get it accepted? What about security with your organization? How did you get that through?
Yeah, all good questions. You know, usually, it's funny when you start to track, kind of like the repository, you'll see, like I do a lot of the project tracking itself in the repository. What I've had in the past is people like the team using another tool like Jira or Azure DevOps or something like that. And then it's like they're tracking in two different areas, right? And it becomes like a headache to track projects in multiple areas and keep everything up to date. So what I've done is actually I've just convinced the team, for the research team, to just track their projects, and doing the stand-ups using Airtable keeps everything a lot more consistent and up to date, and it's also less work for everyone. So they don't have to keep track in multiple places. Also, in terms of security, usually you can talk to your legal team, have them vet it out if needed. Usually haven't faced any issues with that. The best way to keep it secure is to not upload your actual reports, or anything like that to Airtable, but instead have a secure link to the SharePoint site which houses those files. So people still can't, like, somehow they maybe get to the Airtable, they can't access the link still. They might know that you did a project on Cart or something. Usually that's not as big of a deal to the team, rather than knowing the insights. And again, I guess the insights can be important. So again, you'll have to pass that by legal in terms of what information they'll let you secure. Usually if you do need it, like extra security, the legal team might require like an enterprise license, and then you guys can kind of talk through that with your own companies. Does that answer everything, hopefully?
Yes, it does. What kind of ballpark for pricing are we talking about for an enterprise license?
That's a good question. I unfortunately do not have the answer for you.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, so I would I would just encourage you to reach out to them privately, depending on your team's needs. What I have seen done, to be honest, when we've done it in the past, is I'm trying to remember the costs, but we've just done like, hey, we only need maybe like 10 licenses or something for our immediate team. The rest we can just share the view only access with. So we just get like the upgraded pro version, which let me look at real quick. They've got their pricing on their website. Again, yeah, I don't know the enterprise pricing necessarily. So
Thanks.
yep. All right. Any other questions? All right. Good discussion, though. Thank you, everyone, for being here and showing up. I appreciate all your time. Again, let me see if I can share. If you guys are interested in following along, I'm going to try and create more of these to kind of show more features. And again, like going through the note taking in more depth, going through insight tracking in more in depth, kind of how to handle that with your team, with your stakeholders. I've got one scheduled for February, but feel free to use that link I just posted in the chat to kind of keep tabs on where everything's at. I'll try to, I think I've got your guys' emails. If you're interested, I can try and email that information out to you as well. And yeah, and then also if you guys ever do need like private consulting, you want to like just sit down with me privately, go through this, and you're like, hey, I've got like totally different, like very specific niche requirements or things that I need help with, just feel free to contact me directly. My email, I'll just post it in the chat here. I'm just going to use my regular Gmail account with you guys. This is my first webinar hosting with you guys, so we'll keep it nice and intimate with our contact details. But again, appreciate all of you guys. Any final comments or thoughts. All right. Well, cool. Well, we made it under an hour, so appreciate it. I know that was a ton of information. I'm going to send out the recording so you guys can reference back to it, because I know it was a lot. But again, thank you all so much, and hope you have a great rest of your day.
Great presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.